Have you ever noticed that empires rarely fall the moment their enemies grow stronger? They fall the instant they realize they are no longer the first to see the battlefield. And tonight, I want to show you a moment that may someday be remembered as the exact second America understood the Strait of Hormuz was no longer fully under American control. Not because a missile was launched, not because a carrier was destroyed, not because Iran sealed the waterway, but because somewhere high above the planet in total silence, one satellite turned on. And the moment that happened, Washington may have already lost. Now, I know that sounds dramatic. I know some people will hear that and say, come on, one satellite cannot shift the balance of power. One satellite cannot challenge the Pentagon. One satellite cannot threaten the United States Navy. And if that is what you believe, I want you to stay with me until the very end of this analysis. Because what I'm about to show you is not politics. It is not propaganda. It is not theory. It is how power truly works in the real world. And once you understand it, you cannot unsee it. Because this story does not begin in Tehran, and it does not begin in Beijing. It begins thousands of years ago with one simple truth every empire eventually learns. The empire that sees first survives. The empire that sees last dies. The Persians understood this. The Romans understood this. The Mongols understood this. The British understood this. And America built the most powerful military machine in human history around that exact principle. See first, track first, strike first, dominate first. For decades, America believed no ship could move through the Gulf without being seen. No missile could be relocated without being tracked. No bunker could open without being photographed. No convoy could travel without being identified. No signal could be transmitted without being intercepted. For almost half a century, that belief was not arrogance. It was reality. American satellites, American spy planes, American carrier groups, American radar systems, American intelligence alliances, American undersea sensors, American electronic warfare. Together, they created something every enemy feared. Not American bombs, not American soldiers, not even American aircraft carriers. They feared American vision. Because if America can see you, America can kill you. That was the rule. And for decades, nobody challenged it. Not Iraq, not Libya, not Syria, not Afghanistan, not even Russia in many regions. But then, quietly, very quietly, China began building something different. And this is where most people completely misunderstand Chinese strategy. When America became richer, it built bases. When America became stronger, it built fleets. When America became afraid, it built alliances. But when China became powerful, China built eyes. Thousands of eyes. Eyes in deserts, eyes in ports, eyes along trade routes, eyes inside fiber optic cables, eyes in telecom networks, eyes across shipping lanes. And most importantly, eyes in space. While Washington was fighting wars, China was building vision. While Washington was bombing mountains, China was mapping oceans. While Washington was replacing governments, China was redesigning the architecture of global surveillance. And almost nobody paid attention because satellites are boring. Satellites do not make headlines. Satellites do not appear on television. Satellites do not fly over stadiums. Satellites do not give emotional speeches. They simply watch silently, patiently, relentlessly, 24 hours a day, every second. Every movement, every signal, every heat signature, every radar pulse, every ship, every submarine, every aircraft, every missile launcher, every tanker, every destroyer, everything. And that is why what happened next may become one of the most important strategic developments of this decade. Because according to growing regional intelligence chatter, Iran may now have access to Chinese orbital surveillance support. Now think carefully about what that means. Do not rush past this. Do not underestimate it. Because this changes everything. If Iran can see American destroyers before American destroyers see Iran, the balance changes. If Iran can track carrier strike groups in real time, the balance changes. If Iran can monitor aircraft launch patterns, the balance changes. If Iran can identify fuel transfer operations, the balance changes. If Iran can observe drone deployments, the balance changes. If Iran can predict naval movement 6 hours before it happens, the balance changes. And if Iran can do all of this, then the Pentagon has a problem far bigger than missiles. Because missiles can be intercepted, ships can be reinforced, bases can be defended, but blindness destroys empires. Now let me ask you something. What exactly is the Strait of Hormuz? Most people think it is just water, a narrow passage, a shipping route, an oil corridor. But strategists understand something very different. Hormuz is not water. Hormuz is leverage. Hormuz is pressure. Hormuz is economic oxygen. Nearly 20% of the world's oil passes through that narrow corridor. Think about that for a moment. One small stretch of water, and through that corridor flows the energy that powers factories, airports, armies, supply chains, cities, entire civilizations. Japan depends on it. India depends on it. Europe depends on it. China depends on it. And yes, America's financial system depends on it far more than most people realize. Because when oil moves, dollars move. When dollars move, influence moves. And when influence moves, empires survive. For decades, America believed it controlled that artery. But what happens when the artery remains open, yet someone else controls the information surrounding it? What happens when your ships are sailing, but your enemy already knows where they will be tomorrow? What happens when your carrier launches aircraft and your enemy already understands the flight pattern? What happens when your destroyer shifts formation and someone inside an underground bunker already receives the update? What happens when your enemy does not even need to attack you because they can simply observe you and wait for the perfect moment? That is where this story becomes terrifying. Because Iran does not need to defeat America in open battle. Iran does not need to sink aircraft carriers. Iran does not need to destroy entire fleets. Iran only needs one thing: information parity. And once a smaller power reaches information parity with a much larger empire, history becomes extremely dangerous. Because now the giant is no longer hunting. Now the giant can be hunted. And if China truly gave Iran that capability, then Washington may be facing something it has not faced in decades. Not military defeat, something far worse: strategic uncertainty. And when empires become uncertain, they make mistakes. And when America makes mistakes in Hormuz, the entire world pays the price. Because what happened next may prove this was never really about satellites at all. It was about a trap that may have been prepared for years. And if that trap is already active, then the next 72 hours in the Persian Gulf could reshape global power forever. And this is where the story becomes truly dangerous. Because most people still believe wars begin when missiles are launched. They believe wars begin when headlines appear. They believe wars begin when presidents give speeches. They believe wars begin when aircraft carriers change direction. But serious students of history understand something much more uncomfortable. By the time the world finally sees the real war has usually been underway for years, silently, patiently, invisible to almost everyone. And if that is true, then what we are witnessing in the Strait of Hormuz right now may not be the beginning of a conflict. It may be the final stage of a strategy that started more than a decade ago. Let me show you what I mean. In 2013, while Washington was still focused on Afghanistan, still obsessed with counterterrorism, still spending trillions chasing enemies across deserts, China was doing something almost nobody in Western media fully understood. China was not preparing for the next war. China was preparing to control the map of the next war: ports, fiber optic cables, shipping routes, commercial satellites, artificial intelligence, maritime tracking systems, rare earth supply chains, energy corridors, insurance markets, telecommunications, and most importantly, orbital intelligence. Because Chinese strategists understood something most democracies struggle to understand. You do not defeat a stronger empire by attacking its strengths. You surround its strengths, then quietly make them irrelevant. And nowhere is that strategy more visible than in the Persian Gulf. Now imagine sitting inside an underground command center somewhere in Tehran. No windows, no sunlight, only screens. Hundreds of screens. Satellite feeds, thermal signatures, radar sweeps, naval coordinates, oil tanker movement, American carrier positions, electronic emissions, drone launch patterns, refueling schedules, communication bursts. And every few seconds, the map updates. Not every hour, not every day. Every few seconds. Now ask yourself one terrifying question. If Iran can see all of this, what exactly is America hiding anymore? And if America cannot hide, then what happens to deterrence? Because deterrence only works when your enemy fears what they cannot predict. But if your enemy can predict everything, then deterrence begins to die. And when deterrence dies, miscalculation is born. Destroyers rarely become symbols of military power in the public imagination. Aircraft carriers dominate headlines because they appear massive and theatrical. Submarines receive documentaries because invisibility fascinates people. Stealth bombers appear in Hollywood films because they represent technological mystery. But destroyers are something far more important. They are the nervous system of modern naval warfare. They are the ships that connect an entire fleet together. They detect incoming missiles before anyone else sees them. They coordinate radar coverage across entire battle groups. They protect carriers from aircraft, drones, submarines, and missile attacks. They defend fuel convoys and supply routes. They intercept electronic threats. They maintain communication networks in the middle of chaos. Without destroyers, even the most powerful carrier strike group becomes exposed. Without destroyers, missile defense weakens. Without destroyers, the floating fortress of an empire suddenly becomes vulnerable to saturation, confusion, and surprise. Now imagine 3 American destroyers entering the Persian Gulf. Their radar systems scan the horizon continuously. Their crews remain alert every hour of the day. Interceptor missiles are armed and prepared. Helicopters wait on deck for immediate deployment. Officers inside combat information centers analyze electronic signals with complete confidence in their technological superiority. Yet somewhere far away, Iranian intelligence may already know everything that matters. Not guesses, not assumptions. Precise operational awareness. They may know the destroyer's speed, heading, formation spacing, radar signatures, patrol patterns, and likely movements hours before the ships arrive at their next position. They may understand which routes the vessels prefer when their sensors become overloaded, where electronic blind spots emerge, and how commanders respond under pressure. That changes the entire meaning of warfare, because modern battlefields no longer begin when missiles are launched. The battlefield begins the moment your enemy can see you clearly. The side that observes first often gains the initiative long before combat officially starts. If an adversary can continuously track your movements, predict your patterns, and understand your procedures, then the conflict becomes psychological before it becomes kinetic. In many ways, the battle may already be partially decided before the first weapon is fired. What makes this strategic situation even more uncomfortable for Washington is that Iran may not need to strike first at all. That is what makes this approach potentially so effective. Tehran could simply observe. Watch every patrol rotation, measure response times, record radar behavior, analyze communication habits, study escort formations, learn defensive maneuvers, monitor how American crews react during emergencies, drills, and electronic disruptions. Day after day, month after month, the accumulated data transforms the American fleet from an unpredictable military force into something increasingly understandable. And once a military system becomes predictable, it becomes manageable. Once it becomes manageable, it becomes vulnerable. History repeatedly demonstrates this pattern. Powerful empires often fail not because they lack strength, but because they continue relying on systems that once guaranteed dominance while their adversaries quietly adapt beneath them. Athens believed its naval supremacy would preserve its empire forever. Rome believed its military structure represented eternal order. Spain trusted the wealth flowing from its fleets. Napoleon trusted the momentum of conquest. Britain trusted control of the seas. The Soviet Union trusted the permanence of its geopolitical structure. All of them possessed enormous power. All of them inspired fear. Yet every one of them eventually encountered the same brutal reality. Power without adaptation slowly transforms into ritual. And ritual eventually becomes weakness. Now imagine the atmosphere inside Pentagon briefing rooms late at night. Satellite imagery updates across massive digital screens. Naval commanders discuss patrol routes. Intelligence officers compare surveillance reports. Admirals analyze electronic activity inside the Gulf. Then one unsettling question begins appearing again and again in classified discussions. How does Iran reposition so quickly? How are missile batteries moving before surveillance assets arrive? How are drone launch systems disappearing before strikes can target them? How are communication hubs relocating ahead of electronic warfare operations? How are fuel convoys avoiding detection? How are operational patterns being anticipated with such precision? At some point, American strategists may begin confronting an uncomfortable realization. This is not the Iran of 20 years ago. This is not Iraq in 2003. This is not Libya. This is not Afghanistan. This is a state that has spent decades studying every American campaign, every technological doctrine, every intelligence method, every logistical dependency, and every strategic mistake. It is a country shaped by sanctions, isolation, asymmetrical warfare, and constant pressure. And that pressure may have forced adaptation instead of collapse. And if external powers such as China are contributing satellite intelligence, surveillance technology, electronic capabilities, or strategic coordination, then the balance of awareness inside the region changes dramatically. But beneath all military analysis lies the deeper issue that truly matters: energy. Empires rarely fight wars purely for slogans or ideals. They fight to preserve systems. And the foundation beneath the modern global system is energy flow. Every tanker crossing the Strait of Hormuz carries far more than oil. Those shipments carry inflation stability. They carry currency confidence. They carry political legitimacy for governments around the world. They carry stock market valuations, pension fund stability, military budgets, industrial production, shipping reliability, and economic confidence itself. If uncertainty begins surrounding Hormuz, even without a complete blockade, the consequences spread outward immediately. Insurance premiums surge. Shipping companies alter routes. Oil futures react violently. Financial markets become unstable. Supply chains tighten. Central banks reconsider monetary policy. Governments fear inflation shocks. Investors lose confidence in predictability. Suddenly, a narrow waterway in the Middle East begins influencing economic realities thousands of miles away across Europe, Asia, and North America. And perhaps that is the real strategic objective. Not necessarily destroying American ships. Not necessarily triggering direct war. Not necessarily closing the strait entirely. Instead, the goal may simply be creating enough uncertainty that every trader, insurer, shipping executive, and central banker begins asking the same dangerous question. Can the United States still guarantee the uninterrupted flow of global commerce through Hormuz? Because the moment the world begins asking that question seriously, the geopolitical foundation starts to shift. Empires rarely collapse in one dramatic moment. More often, they lose confidence gradually. Influence weakens quietly before visible decline arrives. Allies hesitate. Markets doubt. Rivals gain room to maneuver. Strategic assumptions erode one layer at a time until the international system slowly reorganizes itself around new realities. And if China has helped Iran develop the ability to create that uncertainty without open war, then this extends far beyond regional politics. It is not merely about military cooperation or satellite technology. It may represent a sophisticated form of strategic pressure designed to challenge American dominance indirectly, economically, psychologically, and structurally. No missiles launched. No carrier groups deployed. No dramatic declarations. Yet the balance of perception may already be changing. And if officials in Washington truly understand the implications, then somewhere tonight inside the Pentagon, there may be one question nobody wants to answer openly. If America no longer fully controls the eyes above Hormuz, can it still claim to control Hormuz itself? History suggests that when an empire begins seriously asking that question, the answer may already be emerging.